We work really, really hard. Many of us work really, really hard on checking off boxes. And what we don't work really hard on is being aware or being authentic or being intentional. And if we did those things, the boxes, like you said, Trevor, will get checked off.
You're listening to Inside Acting, a podcast dedicated to demystifying the inner and outer game of success in the entertainment industry. I'm Trevor Elgott.
And I'm AJ Meyer. And in episode 272, we take a look back at the first 3 months of 2017, unpacking what's working, what's not, and what's next in our personal and professional lives. From finances to career to relationships, we cover the big and small of our artistic journeys. And as always, don't hold back. Episode 272. Stay with us.
Support for this episode of Inside Acting is brought to you in part by Rehearsal Pro, the next version of Rehearsal, the essential app for actors, which is now available in the iTunes App Store. I guess that doesn't make it the next version. That makes it the now version.
The now version.
If you want to learn, you want to learn your lines, you guys know the drill. Be off book for your auditions, explore your character, make stronger choices, and do a bunch of other cool stuff that's coming down the pipe. Go to rehearsal.pro/IAP right now and learn all about what this app can do for you and your craft. It is a game changer. It's a new version of Rehearsal. It's available to you right now inside the iTunes App Store for your iOS device. That's rehearsal.pro/IAP.
Hello from San Francisco Bay. That was like an amalgamation of like several songs about San Francisco. I don't want anybody, don't quote me on that melody.
Yeah. I was waiting to hear where you were going to go with it.
Keep you guessing.
So how is it up there?
Gorgeous. So apparently, just like with Alaska, I arrived in San Francisco after like several weeks of like downpour and cold weather. And now apparently it hasn't been like this like all year, and it's gorgeous. The weather's amazing. The show went really well yesterday, and got another one tonight, and then that's it.
So just 2 shows up there.
Yeah, and it's funny because they're not even in the city. One was in last night was in San Rafael, and the other one's down in Palo Alto. So we're north of the city and then south of the city. So that's kind of why we're staying in the city. Plus, our hosts are here. So
that is so cool, man. Now, is the theater covering all your travel expenses?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yes. Round trip flights. We're staying with our hosts, and we got a per diem.
That is so cool, man. You're a working actor.
I am actually being paid to do this thing called storytelling. It's cool. It's beautiful. How are things down south? I feel you're so far away. That's
72 and sunny, man. You know how it goes.
Oh, I see how it
every
is.
Day, every single day of the year.
Listen to this East Coaster Philly boy missing the seasons.
Yeah, I everybody says that. Everyone's like, oh, classic East Coast. But you know what? It really does start to sort of wear on you. You start to lose track of time passing when every single day, and I'm completely generalizing because not every day is exactly the same, but generally speaking, a large majority of the days here are similar weather-wise. You just kind of forget that like it's February or it's July or it's October. And
what month is this?
You start to just sort of, I don't know, it creates a sort of strange experience, at least for me.
This is going to be a terrible segue, but speaking of time, we have a very specific date to announce, very specific announcement to announce here. Do you want to talk about this? Because I know you've been keeping up with the free listening things a little bit closer than I have.
Totally. So those of you who've been listening to the podcast for a while now may remember the interview series we did with Ben Mathis, who's an acting teacher and also the creator and founder or whatever of Urban Confessional, whose sort of flagship thing is this thing called free listening, and anybody can do it. And I said on the podcast a while ago that number one, I felt like we could have just ended the podcast after that interview series because that was just all there was to say. And number two, I think that free listening is probably the best acting class you'll ever get, and it's completely free. So the idea, and Ben talks about this in that interview, so I'll make sure that we link back to that in the show notes. But the idea is you just go outside to like a busy street corner or something somewhere, and you hold up a sign that says free listening, and people come along and hopefully just start talking to you, and your only job is to be a set of compassionate ears for them and just hear their story. And it's extremely powerful, extremely powerful. I know that you were maybe going to talk about the relationships workshop that you did, AJ, during our review. But I found that one of the most powerful sort of exercises in the relationship workshop was very much like a listening exercise where you don't nod or interject your validations or anything when someone is telling you something. You just simply be there and be the space for them to sort of speak into. And I found that to be one of the most powerful things in the world. And anybody can do this anywhere in the world at any time, of course. But there is an official free listening day coming up in just about a week now. It's on April 11th, and you can go to urbanconfessional.org/where-r-u-listening, and the link to that is on our website. But if you'd like to sign up and take part or just learn more about the movement and what Ben's philosophy is, check it out, urbanconfessional.org. Link to that on our website. Free listening day, April 11th, 2017. I hope everybody participates, even if it's just a tiny conversation with a coworker by the water cooler, deciding to consciously come from that place of like, I'm here, I'm listening to you, and I'm not going to give you advice. I'm not going to nod and interject with a story about myself or how the same thing happened to me once. I'm just going to hear you. And like I said, very powerful, world-changing practice, and also the best acting class you'll ever take. So, April 11th, 2017, free listening day, urbanconfessional.org. Check it out.
And that there's no specific time frame or location or whatever. It's just that's the day that's being dedicated to it, and anyone can sort of sign up and then just go out with a sign and do it somewhere.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. All the details are on the website. So I don't want to take up too much time talking about it, but that's the general idea, that there's no barrier to entry. Anybody can and frankly should do this. Yeah.
I love it. Yeah. Great.
I also want to hear about the union event that you attended at SAG-AFTRA President Gabriel Carteris's house. Just as of this recording, it was yesterday.
2 days ago.
2 days ago. I'm sorry, Saturday.
Yeah. I'm a little unclear on how much we can talk about it because it was a meeting for their particular slate. And there's a little bit of confusion. We're trying to figure out if we are considered a media outlet that must give equal time to both slates. So if we talk about one, we have to talk about the other one. So I'm not going to dive into the specific politics, but it was just really cool to be at that event. And more than anything, hear actors talk about and be passionate about the way that they're speaking about the union and moving forward and what we are creating as actors, and also in this time of where in national politics we have a president or we have an administration and potentially a Congress that is pretty anti-union, and that affects us as well. So if there was some kind of change in the labor laws or legislation or whatever that would affect, the entertainment industry as well. So it's just really fascinating time. And I am considering throwing my hat into the ring as a delegate to the convention this year. And that's some, I don't know, union politics or specifically entertainment union politics is not something I had ever considered getting involved with. And being there, I was just really inspired to at least know what was going on, to be informed. Is really what I'm saying. So it was really cool. Yeah.
That's cool. So, now, obviously, it was a union event. I know it's a Unite for Strength event. But for our listeners, and frankly for me as well, can you clarify what exactly a SAG-AFTRA delegate is or does?
I'll try to be brief. Essentially, every 2 years, there is a convention that takes place where the Constitution of the Union gets amended, ratified, like things get added to it, subtracted to it, whatever. It's et cetera, et cetera. It gets modified. It's one of the biggest ways that the union and its policies and the negotiating power moves forward. And so as a delegate to that convention, you essentially get to vote in those various things. So you vote on things from like, people going into positions to, amendments to the Constitution, et cetera, et cetera. So that's it in brief. There's other responsibilities that a delegate can participate in, but not necessarily is not necessarily required. The main requirement, the main commitment is basically those 3 days, and I believe it's in October this year. That's the main commitment.
Got it. Okay. Very cool. Well, excited to hear how this unfolds for you. And you're right. I didn't think about the idea that we are essentially a news outlet, and so we have to be sort of careful about what we endorse and what we don't. Well,
it may have changed recently, so that's why we get to do some research on. Jen's working on this. We're doing some research on it to figure out if we actually, if there's certain, we would never like ram politics down somebody's throat, but it's about just being clear that we're being fair, essentially. Before we move on to the meat of the episode, so to speak, we do get to hear from our other sponsor, VOtoGogo.com, which is the award-winning voiceover training system and winner of Backstage's Reader's Choice Award for Best VO Training 4 years in a row. Visit VOtoGogo.com/start for a free Getting Started in Voiceover online class that'll help you add voiceover to your acting portfolio. That's VO as in voiceover, the number 2, gogo.com/start.
So let's jump into this, man. This is an opportunity for us to get vulnerable every 3 months, every 25% chunk of the year that passes. We get to take some time and reflect on what's happening and kind of pull in the reins and make sure our lives and careers aren't getting away from us, and that we're being intentional about what it is that we are doing and speaking into and being with our time and energy here on this planet. So we both have quite a bit to sort of speak into. Do you have anything that you would like to start off with?
Yeah, I noticed, we talked about this before we started recording, that you sort of changed up the format of your review document this year, and I love it. I was sharing for our listeners, I was sharing with Trevor that when I read through this, I actually got pretty emotional because of your vulnerability, and I was like, if you could just read this on the air, that would be amazing. But I know that we don't necessarily have time for that. So however you want to sort of break this down, the main concepts and points in this are just, I feel you, dog. I feel you. Like I'm so with you on all of this. And I don't know necessarily how to get all of the goodness, how to wring all the goodness out of this. So I'm kind of looking to you to kind of guide me through your document. And then I guess I will do the same with mine.
Sure. Well, before we go any further, we should just remind our listeners that these documents are available for you to check out, take a look at. If you're a member, they're available inside the membership. And I guess we don't. Sometimes we post it sort of publicly for anybody and everybody to check out. I'm going to restrict mine to the membership just because it is sort of sensitive this time around. But, if you want to take a look at the actual text of how these work, please feel free to log into the membership and do that. But we usually cover sort of a few domains of our lives, career, fitness, finances, relationships, whatever, service, spirituality, education. And we just we ask ourselves those 3 questions. What worked this past quarter? What didn't work? And then what are we going to do next with this new information that we've, reflected on? I changed it up this year. I had life-changing stuff happen, and so I ended up just writing more of kind of like a personal essay or manifesto or doctrine or something. So yours is a little bit more bullet point, and mine's a little bit more narrative, I guess.
But prose.
Yeah, I started off just by letting my word for 2017 guide me, and that word is vulnerability. And your word is rebirth. And just by looking over both of our documents, it looks like we both lived into and breathed into and spoke into and moved into our words. I'd like to start with you because you had a lot of things that were working this year. Your list of what worked is about 3 times as long as your list of what didn't work. Mm-hmm. So I know that you had some ups and downs this past quarter. I'd love to hear what you found or what you really learned, what those big takeaways were for you. So maybe we can kick off with the top bullet point, which is the relationships workshop, which we alluded to earlier.
Yeah, well, and what I say there is continued my work on just introspection. I think the biggest, I think if there was a word that I was not focused on, but that was a theme for the first quarter, was awareness. I have such a new awareness about so many different things, but especially about myself, the way I move through the world and the way that I interact with others. That is, it's next level for me. And as a result of that, I don't know how to say this necessarily. Like everything is different. I'm making different choices. I'm moving through the world differently. I see things differently. You mentioned in your documents like having X-ray glasses on. It does sort of feel like that, or maybe not X-ray, but sort of these glasses that I have put on and sort of see things not through them, but differently than I had before. And awareness and intention are so powerful. And I think at one point in your document, you even say something like intention can be kind of like this double-edged sword. And I think what's important is that when we make choices, any choice in our life, the more intentional and aware that we can be about what it is that we're actually doing, the better off we're going to be. So for instance, if I make the choice to, eat a chocolate cake by myself, I know that is going to affect me in a particular way. It's probably an unhealthy choice, and it's not going to be, it's not going to be supportive. But there is, in fact, a way of doing that where I go, you know what? I am intentionally doing this as opposed to unconsciously just ravenously devouring, a chocolate cake, which is what most people do when they make that kind of unhealthy decision. And the reason I'm spending so much time talking about this is because this is the theme of my first quarter. Was everything was, for the most part, with not a ton of exceptions. When I went to New York and stuff, I got kind of distracted and things got really busy because I came right back to the show, and then it was more of a, okay, I'm just going to work, going to the show, going to work, going to the show. That those last few weeks of the quarter were kind of nuts. But leading up to that, the awareness level was so high that everything felt very intentional. Like I'm choosing to do this, or I just noticed myself doing something unconsciously. And so when I say continued introspection work, that relationships workshop, because I was so, and I wrote about this in the blog post that I put in the newsletter that week. One of the reasons that was such a successful forward moving weekend for me is because of how aware and intentional I was over that weekend. And so when I looked down this list of what worked, it was very much continuing on that theme. Focus on increasing income, for instance, was another intentional thing I did this quarter. I've mentioned this on previous episodes. Like it felt like, okay, I get to be a big boy now. It is possible for me to make a lot of money and be able to pursue my acting career. Those two things are not diametrically opposed. And that awareness got me, I'm very close. I just don't have the official word. It got me very close to this promotion at Apple. Doing this show, for instance, with the Jewish Women's Theater, another win. For me, I was very aware of the fact that I was telling stories, and that's what I want and love to do, is to tell stories and to help others tell their stories. So another aspect of my personality, my vision, my identity coming into focus. As a result, everything just sort of started to, I don't want to say fall into place, but it made me so aware of, oh, I'm creating new relationships in every audition. Every audition is about creating a relationship and being the authentic version of myself and taking care of myself, like finding a chiropractor I put on my list of what worked. just being aware of like, you know what, I get to not be in pain, like my shoulder and neck and back. Like I get to not I can't ignore that and be unconscious about it. So all of these wins are underneath this umbrella of awareness and intention. And it's been so huge this quarter, such that I don't even necessarily feel like I needed to have something like these bullet points. I don't feel like I needed to have like, oh, this was a win and this was a win and this was a win, because everything in awareness and intention is not necessarily a win, but it's effective and forward moving. And that's just how the whole thing felt. The whole quarter. It was a very different experience than I've had in the past.
I love it, man. It's the difference between ways of doing and ways of being. And ways of being is so much more powerful because when you choose to be a certain person, the doings just flow automatically. You don't have to fight anything. It just naturally happens because you are the kind of person that gets things done. You are the kind of person that faces down difficult or frightening circumstances. Well,
and then in the what didn't work, like if I look at what didn't work, all of that stuff was a result of a lack of awareness, a lack of focus, a lack of intention. And so it was just the inverse of everything that I just said. So every time I noticed that something like wasn't working or I wasn't, it's like when we put together these documents, sometimes we say like, I am committed to doing X, Y, and Z by such and such a date. That's really powerful. Absolutely. Those declarations are extremely powerful. And I think that everybody gets to do that so that we can stay motivated or at least keep ourselves sort of on track towards a vision. But if we're not aware of the why, if we're not intentional about it, or if a habit, for instance, slips or we're not, keeping up with it, chances are the why wasn't powerful enough. The intention behind it wasn't powerful enough. And then there's this thing that also happened for, I think, both of us this quarter, Trevor, where we just are like, oh, okay, that's interesting. I'm not going to beat myself up over the fact that like that habit or intention or whatever slipped, but just to, once again, be aware of it. And not, for instance, I talk about much later, and one of the domains I want to focus on this quarter coming up is spiritual domain. Headspace has not been super effective for me. I'm not going to blame Headspace. I'm not going to like be a victim to Headspace for me not meditating. That's on me. That's my choices that have. But what I can do is figure out if there's something that is going to resonate with me, that is effective for me. I don't know, that to me, that's just a different, it might sound like I'm just repeating stuff that we've already talked about for years on the podcast, but it just hit me in a different way these last 3 months.
What you just mentioned about meditation brings to mind something that I read from Tony Robbins recently. And somebody asked him if he meditates in the morning, and he was sort of sharing his morning routine or ritual. And he said, I'm not interested in finding the space between thoughts. Like, I'm interested in finding clarity. I'm interested in connecting to vision. He's like, so I wouldn't say that I meditate. I just give myself, the opportunity to seek out clarity. And I think that's a key distinction. And it reminds me a little bit of something else I read from Ryan Holiday, who's a speaker and a writer and a devourer of books. And he wrote a blog post that I read recently that was about if you want to be a writer, you're kind of going about it the wrong way. It's like when we apply these labels to things, or we decide that we want to sort of masturbatorily, be something because it feels good, and there's an act of writing beautifully that we kind of get off on. It's like that's kind of the wrong approach, and that's not really going to get us anywhere. Like, if we being a writer is the result of having something that you can't not say, and writing is the only way that you can express it. And I think that there's something in there around what you just said with what you're speaking into with meditation, where it's like, it's not about like, oh, I meditate. It's about like, what am I really after here? It's about that intentionality, being clear on the vision you want to connect to, and then finding the way to get there. And whatever tool it is that gets you there is the right tool.
You asked me an episode or two ago, I can't remember, what kind of tools would you recommend for someone in terms of like getting to know them? Because I talked about authenticity. And like I said, every time that I noticed these things slipping, it was because I was not aware. So it's not about working on the doing, like I must meditate every single day. No, it's about figuring out, taking a step back and going, like, what has me not taking the time to be intentional, I guess. So it's about the beingness is about, we work really, really hard. Many of us work really, really hard on checking off boxes. And what we don't work really hard on is being aware or being authentic or being intentional.
Yeah.
And if we did those things, the boxes, like you said, Trevor, will get checked off.
Yeah. Because I think that it's easy to check off boxes because it's a mindless activity. You think once and then you just create your boxes and then you just turn your brain off and you just follow instructions. And that's great. That's actually a big part of the philosophy behind GTD getting things done. Mm-hmm. But mindfulness is a whole other muscle. It's actually in a different category, I think, where you just have to train it. You have to train your brain to be tuned in on a more consistent basis. And it's like going to the gym. Andy says it in the Headspace journey all the time, training the mind. And it takes more effort. And I think that's why a lot of people don't do it, because it's not easy. It's rare because it's the path of greater resistance. But you can get there. It just takes time, just takes focus and commitment.
Yeah. So tell me about your, because we do have some overlap here. Both of us had, some pretty traumatic things happen over the last 6 months or so. And I'm curious. I mean, there's some overlap there, but there's also some overlap in some of the breakthroughs or realizations that we had. Tell me about, if I had to sum up my quarter, the word would be awareness. I'm not saying you have to narrow it down to a word, but how would you sum up your quarter with what worked and what didn't work? And sort of summing up the document that you put together.
Yeah. Wow. There's a lot here. I'll just go ahead and share this on the show. I haven't known how to navigate this sort of publicly, so I've sort of refrained from speaking about it at all. But let's see here. 4 or 5 weeks ago, my older brother passed away unexpectedly. And it was pretty, very unexpected and pretty, awful and difficult. And it's been a really odd past few weeks. Something that has been quite a journey for me. And that's basically what my document is about. I sat down to write this, and I was looking back over the past few months, and of course this event loomed much larger than anything else. And I ended up just sort of writing about this. And really, I would say, if I had to sort of sum it up, it came like death in death to the living, not meaning like somebody that dies, but if you lose somebody, if you lose a loved one, especially unexpectedly or tragically, or, if you didn't have a chance to say goodbye or whatever it is, it really has a way of just bringing perspective in ways that nothing else can. Like all of a sudden, the cold hard reality rushes in of the fragility of life and what really matters and and I'm sure that many people listening have experienced this, but for me, it was just this instant, like I couldn't turn away from the things that I was habitually doing in my life and the ways I was habitually being, both with myself and with other people. And I was like, every single thing, it was like a hyper awareness. It was like all of a sudden the world was both blandly black and white and also like hyper technicolor at the same time. And you just look at every thing and you just go, why am I doing this? Like, what is the purpose behind this? What is the payoff that I'm getting? Or what is the investment that I'm making? Or what are people around me experiencing when I am this way with them in their world?
Yeah. It's like, I mean, you said death of the living. It's like having a near-death experience. You hear about people who had like a big car accident or something. They start to question everything about their lives afterwards. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Everything it brings, like I said, it brings perspective and clarity like nothing else can. And so I've been navigating these waters the past few weeks. It's still really fresh. It was recently, it was a month ago, and I haven't known how to do it. And a friend called me and said, he reminded me, he said, that there's no right way to do this, just so you know. Just don't forget, like, you're not doing it wrong, or you're doing it right. If you have a good day one day and the next day you just can't get out of bed, it's like, it's okay. Don't beat yourself up. Like, there's nowhere. So that was actually something I really needed to hear. And that's what it's been. There have been days where I'm like, oh, it's over. I'm fine. Like, it doesn't bother me anymore. This is great. I'm fixed. I'm healed. And then 5 minutes later, don't talk to me. I don't want to be around anybody. I'm not hungry. Like, I just become a nasty person. And it's just, there's these subconscious things that are happening. And I think I just kind of had to learn to let go of the steering wheel and just ride it, and just be taken for the ride, and just not resist that, and accept that that there's a new way to see things. And in that way, my brother's death has been a gift, and I've learned to really connect with the intention behind everything that I think, do, and say in my life. And it's been humbling and sobering and empowering and frightening and all sorts of things. And what it comes down to for me, and I wrote about this in my document for the quarter, but I basically realized that I'm not motivated by money. I never have been. I've always thought there was something wrong with me because a lot of people I know want nice things. They want the nice car and they want the nice house. And I've tried to sort of talk myself into that mindset. And it's always been sort of I've had to like beat myself over the head with it. Like, oh, these are the things you want, Trevor. This will equal success. And it's never motivated me. For better and worse, I'm not too attached to appearances. What does motivate me is freedom and choice and deep conversations and relationships and learning about the human condition. The more of that I can do, the more fulfilling I find my life is. I don't care what kind of car I drive, frankly. I want it to work, but I don't care what it looks like. And again, for better or worse, I could probably pay more attention to appearances sometimes, but the big revelation was that, like, I'm not motivated by those things. I'm motivated by freedom. And then I started looking into ways that I can create that freedom. With my brother's death, of course, you start dealing with all the other things, insurance and burial costs, and what's going to happen with the job and income, and like all these different things, with his family and his girls. And I was like, I don't want to worry about money anymore. I hate that his family has to worry about money. I hate that even enters into the conversation. Like, why do we have this? And so I started looking into ways to create more freedom and choice for myself. And I found a new energy in my life in that. Because all of a sudden I turned my focus from my vision board and my vision book and the Tesla and the dream house. And I was like, yeah, those things would be nice. But what I really want is just the freedom to choose to do what I want to do. And how do you do that? And so I've been digging into personal finance and a little bit of philosophy and other things like that. So it comes down to just intentionality, like you spoke into, and like we said the other episode, trying things the hard way, because work is its own reward in a lot of ways. I think I don't really believe in like the life hacking movement so much. I think that it's great that people are searching for ways to optimize, but a lot of times changing your own car battery or changing your car's oil, sometimes that can be just as rewarding as finding a way to shave 25 minutes off a task. Because you want somebody else to do it for you, so you can focus on a high leverage activity. I'm finding a different approach to those things. I'm not so interested now in like optimization as I am in satisfaction. So whatever that means at this moment in time is it. But just to sort of sum this up, because I know we're running short on time here. A couple things that I found a lot of inspiration in during this journey. The cold shower thing was weird because it was like a voice, and this is going to sound weird, but it was like a voice came down into my head and told me I needed to start doing this because I was having a tough couple of days, and I haven't been sleeping well. And I looked in the mirror one day and I just saw this guy who looked just tired and depressed and haggard. And I was like, I looked at him and I was like, I don't want to be around that guy. Why would anybody else want to be around that guy? And again, I was practicing not beating myself up for being in the process, but it was literally like a voice popped in my head and it said, Trevor, get in a shower, turn on as cold as possible right now. And so I did. And it was kind of the exact thing I needed. And it sort of opened the gates to this philosophy, which is satisfaction over optimization, I guess you could sum it up as. So anyway, the two things that sort of have been inspiring to me are, number one, this keynote that Mr. Money Mustache gave. I've spoken about Mr. Money Mustache's blog on the podcast before. It's mrmoneymustache.com. He is a guy who retired at 30 years old, not because he had some inheritance or hit, some great stock investment, but because he just lived on less than he earned. And he writes about not really the financial part of it and much more about like the philosophy part of it, who you need to be as a person. And that's been inspiring to me. So this keynote that he gave at the World Domination Summit is how to retire early, get rich, and save the world, or something like that. And it's 26 minutes and it's awesome. And then from that, I sort of followed the dots to this number that basically equals freedom, is financial freedom. And the number is essentially you multiply your annual living expenses by the number 25. And that number that you end up with is the number that you need, the amount of money you need to have invested in mutual funds, spinning off 8 to 10% every year in interest for you to be able to say, I am financially independent. And it's a lot less than people might think. So if your yearly expenses, if you are intentional and you're not spending, on wasteful things that aren't bringing you happiness or satisfaction, you can get your spending down to a level and retire 20 years earlier as long as you let happiness and satisfaction be your guiding values. And so if you live on $25,000 a year, that's I think if I did the math correctly, that's $625,000 in investments. But through the power of compound interest, you can get there, Mr. Money Mustache says, in less than 11 years if you learn to save aggressively and invest pretty much everything. So it's exciting to see how this is possible and how it aligns with this philosophy of trying things the hard way.
You know what's so motivating and inspirational about this? I love this. This is one of my favorite things that you've discovered that you put in your document. Is it's so specific. It's just, there's the number. Just do this math, and there's a number. It's something to aim for, and specificity is coming up huge on the podcast right now. So thank you for sharing that. What do you feel like are since we're so short on time, what do you feel are like the big rock, what's next for you? Like the things that are going to be, really important for you to focus on, even if it's not a doing necessarily, but in terms of, what's coming up for you in the next 3 months for, this upcoming quarter.
I'm glad you asked that, because I have been really excited and felt really activated in a way that I haven't in a long time. And that is all thanks to this idea of letting happiness and satisfaction be my guiding values and not efficiency or optimization. It's not that I'm opposed to those things. It's just that I find that so often they are not the reward that I'm seeking. And I'm really excited over the next quarter to sort of continue practicing this and being with this and expanding it in small ways in different directions to see, where I'm willing to try things and learn new skills and do them and make them a part of my life. Like I would love to be a guy who could say I know how to change my car's oil. Like I'm not reliant on an easy lube or something. Just to say I know how my car works. Like that would feel great, even though I bike to work most of the time. So I think that the short answer is just over the next few months, I'm going to let that really be a practice and a guide. It's like trying things the hard way and seeing whether the happiness I get from that is worth it. And there are some things I may well decide are not worth it. Like changing my car's oil, probably not something I'm going to do on the regular. I think I'm willing to pay somebody $25 to do that. But just to say I know how it works, I've done it. I've gotten oil in my hands. I think that would be kind of cool.
Yeah.
So that, and I would also say, just from a doing perspective, increasing my income for sure. I have a real opportunity to do that with voiceover, and I've been leaning into it. Of course, every time I lean into voiceover, it rewards me very nicely, and so I'm continuing to do that. And I'm also making a lot more time for reading, because that is something that I enjoy probably more than almost anything else. I just love reading and unpacking and unspooling information about the human condition and history and I just love that shit. So I'm gonna make time to really absorb new information and implement it in my life and separate the wheat from the chaff. And it's kind of a quiet, more labor-intensive life that I'm going to try on over these next few months, I think.
I love it. And honestly, I think there's, once again, some overlap, because for me, I have there's, if anybody wants to go check out the document, there are some doings, like some bullet points where I want to accomplish a certain thing by a certain date. But most of them underneath it is, well, in the career domain, for instance, underneath it is the why and the specific goals that I'm aiming for that we talked about in the Chelsea Crisp episodes. And then with the rest of it, with work and the spirituality domain, it's all about this awareness and finding what resonates with me, and just knowing that for me, this quarter is not about working on work. It's not about working on my career. It's not about working on being more spiritual. Now I'm starting to sound like JP Sears. It's not about working on being more spiritual. It's actually, the work for me right now is about working on being intentional, working on being aware. And whenever I do those things, everything else, as we've been saying over and over and over again, just falls into place.
Yeah.
So I have these, a few little guiding things here and there. And it's not necessarily about being lazy. I'm not letting myself off the hook. Like, I'm not going to declare anything and it's all going to be woo-woo and fine. It's more about not necessarily focusing on the declarations of doing this, but the declarations of beingness. So you and I are it's really funny. Like we're both experiencing similar, it's like a Venn diagram. There's some overlap and there's some that isn't. But
absolutely. Well, I want to end with this. If you could fast forward 3 months from this moment right now and have one major accomplishment that you could look back and say, I handled that. That is installed in my life, or that is a big checkbox that I got to mark off this quarter. What would that one thing be?
I'm gonna say 2, because they're in sort of slightly different domains, and I think that they are both absolutely accomplishable. One is assuming that I did in fact get this promotion. It will be a significant enough increase in my yearly salary that I believe wholeheartedly that I could eliminate the entirety of my credit card debt by the end of this quarter.
Wow, that'd be awesome.
And then 2 would be because I didn't talk about this on the podcast, but in my document I talked about how I fell behind on the Artist's Way when I went to New York. So I didn't finish with the rest of the cluster, but to finally finish complete the Artist's Way by the end of the quarter. I think those 2 things would be huge. And the part of the reason why is because they include all of these other. There's a lot of other things that have to happen in order for those to happen, and a lot of other things that get affected by those 2 things.
Right. They're like bottleneck goals almost. Like once they're handled, everything else becomes sort of easier. Yeah. That's a really great. I love that bottleneck. That's a really great way to put it. Absolutely. Do you have one that you're sort of is your big thing for the quarter? Or was that question just for me? Yeah, no, totally. I was thinking about it. Once I asked it, I was like, oh shit, Trev, you're going to have to answer this now.
You're going to have to answer this too. Yeah, right.
Yeah. From a being standpoint, I'm still in process with my brother's death, and I think that there's really no going back. This was a huge, not to be so self-centered about it, but this was a huge leap forward for me just to sort of field something like this. And I don't think that I can go back to sort of mindlessly doing things anymore. I think that everything is now going to be infused with a sense of awareness and intentionality and just sort of a sense of of the fragility and sacredness of interactions with other human beings, and how that's what life is about. It's about other people. That's what it is. Life is about other people. You want the answer? The secret of life, the purpose of life, it's about other people. That's my belief at this point, because people aren't going to be here forever. And so now is the time. And secondly, from a purely sort of material standpoint, I also think that I'll be able to make some significant progress on my debt, my credit card debt this quarter. And I have a Target account that I'm working on right now that I'm pretty sure will be eliminated, completely paid up in full, well ahead of our next quarterly review episode. So I'm looking forward to really putting that one to bed and starting on the next one.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
Let's do it, man. Let's crush that together.
Amen. Let's do it. So there's a lot we didn't talk about in these documents that we also outlined, that anybody can go into the membership and read about. Maybe not anybody. Our members can go into the membership and read about. But we invite you to not only take a look at these and share your thoughts, but also to create your own document. It doesn't have to look like ours, or be as detailed, or it can be far more detailed, whatever works for you. But the reason we do this is because we want to walk the walk of taking some time to be intentional about what we're doing, rather than just sort of getting lost in the habitual flow and the responsiveness of a busy, Western culture life that's sort of rooted in capitalism and consumerism. It's easy to kind of get lost in that flow. And we do this to return on a regular basis to ask ourselves, okay, what, why, and when? Essentially.
Yeah.
So please join us inside the membership, or on your own, or wherever. We'd love to see your reviews and hear what's coming up for you, and really just kind of sort of go through this life journey together, because it is about community. It is about people. All boats rise with the tide. I think that does it for this episode. Yeah?
Yes, sir.
All
Beautiful.
Right. All right, guys.
Thank you, mate. I just want to say I'm grateful for you.
You beat me to it. I was going to say the same exact thing. I've always ended these episodes feeling such a profound sense of gratitude, not only for you, AJ, your friendship, and the ability to just, I know that when I'm with you, I can be myself shamelessly and not be judged for it. And that is one of the greatest gifts a person can give somebody else. So thank you for not only being that for me, but for showing me and the community what that looks like. But also, I want to thank our community for creating the space. Never once have I shared something like this on this podcast and gotten some sort of critical comment from somebody. I've never felt like I was being unsafe or speaking into an unsafe space. Yeah. And I have goosebumps and a feeling in my stomach just saying that. A little bit of tears come up. I want to thank our audience and our listeners for being that in the world, because the world needs a lot more of that. And thank you for being that.
Yeah.
Let's keep it going.
Yeah. Beautifully said, man.
All right.
Beautifully said.
Thanks.
Let's end it on that.
All right. Today's episode of Inside Acting was produced and hosted by me, Trevor Algott, and AJ Meyer. Jen Levin is our production coordinator. She's killing it, by the way. Thank you, Jen, for all your hard work lately. Gidala Gubrek is our marketing and web director. Deborah Smith is our community manager. And by the way, check her stuff out on Instagram. Deborah is also killing it. She's just booking acting gig after acting gig, and it's really exciting to follow her journey. So keep it up, Deb. Grace Gordon is our Director of Public Relations, and Fern Lim designed our logo. Trevor Algott edited and mixed today's episode and composed our theme and interview music.
You can sign up for our weekly email dispatch and listen to all of our episodes at our website, insideacting.net. You can also find us on social media and wherever you get your podcasts. If you've got a minute, please leave us a review on iTunes, because that really helps us out a lot.
Big thanks to our sponsors, Rehearsal Pro and VO2GoGo.com, and a big thanks to you guys, our listeners, not just for everything that we said, but just for being you and going forward into the world and chasing your dreams. Pretty awesome. You can visit our website to subscribe to our weekly newsletter if you'd like, get links to everything we talked about in this episode, and also if you'd like, you can support the continued production of this here show with either a one-time financial contribution or an ongoing contribution as part of our membership. This show would not exist without your support, so thank you so much to everybody who supports us on a monthly basis. Everybody who has sent in a one-time donation, it means more than you know. And if you are listening and you haven't done either of those yet and you're thinking you might like to, head over to insideacting.net, click on the contribute tab to learn more and to show us a little bit of love.
Hey, as long as they're willing to give, I don't care if they contribute or contribute. Doesn't matter to me. That's it for episode 272, your Q1 of 2017 review episode of Inside Acting. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week. And in the meantime, satisfaction over optimization.